A 19-year-old opened TikTok on an ordinary Friday and found his own mother declared missing by 1.2 million strangers. He did not scroll past it. He did not laugh it off in private. He went live. And in doing so, Jayden James Federline said out loud what a lot of people watching Britney Spears from a distance had already started to suspect: that the story being sold about her online had almost nothing to do with the woman actually living it. The moment happened on July 17th, 2026. According to Us Weekly, Jayden described stumbling across a TikTok video with the caption framing itself as the biggest theory on the internet, asking a question that should never have needed asking. Is Britney Spears still alive? He did not treat it as an abstract curiosity. He treated it as an insult with a body count of likes attached. I hop on TikTok and I see this one video that has 1.2 million likes, he said, according to the outlet's report of the live stream, before pointing out that anyone doubting his mother's existence could simply visit her page and see her posting in real time. That single sentence carries more weight than it first appears to. It is not a legal statement. It is not a press release drafted by a publicist. It is a son, live and unscripted, reacting to the fact that his mother's basic existence had become a debate topic with a scoreboard. AFP News, reporting on the same live stream, quoted Jayden telling viewers they could go to her page and see her right now, a line that reduces years of speculation to the simplest test imaginable, the kind of test conspiracy theories are usually built to survive, without ever actually passing. The theory itself is not new. It belongs to a genre that has followed Britney Spears for the better part of a decade, evolving out of the Free Britney movement and the scrutiny that came with her 13-year conservatorship. That conservatorship placed control over her finances, and for long stretches her personal decisions, in the hands of others, and the fight to end it became one of the most closely watched legal battles in modern celebrity history. A Los Angeles judge terminated the arrangement in November 2021 after nearly 14 years, and the movement that helped push for that outcome never fully disbanded once it succeeded. It simply redirected its attention. In the years since, her public behavior, her captions, her dancing videos, and her sporadic disappearances from social media all became raw material for an audience trained to read hidden meaning into everything she posted. Some of that scrutiny grew out of genuine concern, a holdover instinct from years of watching someone who had, in fact, been controlled by people around her. But somewhere along the way, concern curdled into something closer to spectacle, a habit of treating her Instagram feed like a crime scene to be interpreted rather than a person's ordinary life. The clone theory is simply the most extreme version of that habit. The idea that the real Britney vanished at some point and was quietly replaced by someone else wearing her name. The Express Tribune reported that Jayden called the theory ridiculous outright, framing it not as an open question, but as a symptom of a much larger problem with how people consume information. That larger problem is what makes his comments worth examining seriously rather than treating them as just another celebrity family soundbite. According to AOL's coverage of the live stream, Jayden did not stop at defending his mother. He turned his frustration toward the audience itself, arguing that a post's popularity had replaced its accuracy as the thing people actually respond to. If it has a lot of likes, he said, people believe it without doing any research of their own. That is not a complaint about Britney Spears. That is a complaint about the architecture of the platform he was standing on while he said it. To understand why that complaint lands as more than teenage exasperation, it helps to look at where Jayden was just a few years earlier. In September 2022, at 15 years old, he sat for an interview with ITV and spoke candidly about the distance that had grown between him and his mother. He did not pretend the relationship was fine. He acknowledged the strain directly, telling the network that he believed the relationship could be repaired, though it would take considerable time and effort. That interview matters here because it establishes something important about his credibility. He was never a son performing loyalty for the cameras. He was a teenager willing to describe a fractured relationship honestly, in public, at an age when most people would rather say nothing at all. The years between that ITV interview and the July 2026 live stream were not smooth. Jayden and his older brother Sean Preston moved to Hawaii with their father, Kevin Federline, in 2023, following a publicized rift that intensified after Britney's conservatorship ended. Reports at the time described tension over how each side of the family characterized the years under conservatorship, with Jayden at one point publicly defending his grandfather Jamie Spears, a comment Britney herself said deeply saddened her. There were also public messages from Jayden during that stretch that read less like conflict and more like a teenager trying to keep a door open, including remarks in which he said he loved his mother and hoped they could eventually sit down and have a normal conversation again. That was the emotional terrain the family was navigating, and it matters for how his July 2026 comments should be understood. It was not a simple story of an absent son and a misunderstood mother. It was two people who loved each other, working through real hurt, in full view of an audience that rarely extended them the privacy that kind of repair usually requires, and often treated every fluctuation in that relationship as fresh evidence for whatever theory happened to be trending that week. By late 2024, according to widespread reporting, Britney and Jayden had reunited, spending time together again after the earlier estrangement. So when Jayden stood in front of a live stream audience in the summer of 2026 and defended his mother's existence against a conspiracy theory, he was not speaking from a place of forced obligation. He was speaking as someone who had done the harder, slower work of rebuilding an actual relationship, and who now had to watch strangers turn that relationship's most basic fact, that his mother was alive and present, into content designed to be doubted for engagement. That is really what Jayden's comments expose, once you separate the celebrity gossip framing from what he was actually describing. He was not just refuting a bizarre claim about cloning. He was naming the mechanism that let the claim travel as far as it did. And that mechanism has been studied far beyond the world of Britney Spears. In 2018, researchers Soroush Vasugi-Debroy and Sinan Arrow published a study in the journal Science titled The Spread of True and False News Online. They analyzed roughly 126,000 rumor cascades, shared by about 3 million people more than 4.5 million times over more than a decade of data. Their conclusion was uncomfortable but clear. False stories consistently traveled farther, faster, and deeper than true ones, and the effect held even after accounting for automated bot activity. Human beings, not machines, were the primary reason falsehood outran fact. A caption asking whether a pop star is secretly dead or replaced fits precisely the profile that research identified, because novelty and shock generate exactly the kind of sharing behavior that ordinary, accurate information rarely inspires. There's a second layer to why a theory like this can feel credible even people who know better, and it has to do with repetition rather than evidence. In 2015, psychologists Lisa K., Fazio, Nadia M., Brazier B., Keith Payne, and Elizabeth J. Marsh published a study in the Journal of Experimental Psychology titled Knowledge Does Not Protect Against Illusory Truth. Their experiments found that hearing a claim repeated made people rate it as more believable, even when that claim directly contradicted knowledge the participants already had. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect, and it explains something important about how a fringe idea about Britney Spears can start to feel established simply because it keeps resurfacing across different accounts, different edits, and different captions, even when all of those posts trace back to the same unverified claim. There is also research suggesting the problem is not that audiences are incapable of telling truth from fiction, but that accuracy simply is not what they are thinking about in the moment of scrolling. In 2021, Gordon Pennycook and David Rand published research in the journal Nature showing that when people were prompted to think specifically about accuracy before sharing content, the quality of what they chose to share improved measurably. Their findings suggest that misinformation often spreads not because people are fooled in some deep sense, but because the platforms they use rarely ask them to pause and consider whether something is true before rewarding them for reacting to it. That pause is not just a hopeful idea. In 2020, researcher Andrew M. Guest and his colleagues published a digital media literacy study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, testing whether a short intervention could improve people's ability to tell reliable headlines from false ones. It worked. Discernment improved by more than 26% among participants in the United States, and by more than 17% in India. In plain terms, a small nudge toward critical thinking measurably changed how people evaluated what they saw online, which means the gullibility Jayden described is not a fixed trait. It is a habit, and habits can be interrupted. Put all that alongside what Jayden actually said, and his comments started to look less like a celebrity son rolling his eyes and more like an accurate diagnosis of a system that rewards the wrong thing. A caption claiming his mother might be dead, or replaced does not need evidence to succeed. It needs velocity. It needs a kind of emotional jolt that makes someone stop scrolling. And once enough people react, the reaction count itself becomes an argument. Nobody has to prove Britney Spears was cloned. They just have to make the question feel too big to ignore, and 1.2 million likes did exactly that. What makes Jayden's response land differently than a standard celebrity denial is the same thing that made his 2022 ITV interview notable in the first place. He has never pretended his family was simple. He acknowledged the pain when it was real, and he defended his mother when the claim against her was absurd. And both of those responses came from the same place: a refusal to let other people write the story of his family for their own convenience. In 2022, that meant admitting things were broken. In 2026, it meant telling over 1 million strangers that the woman they were debating like a mystery was one scroll away from proving them wrong. Somewhere between those two moments is the real story. Not a clone, not a disappearance, but a teenager who grew into someone willing to publicly correct a record, even though correcting it required no dramatic reveal, no lawsuit, no press conference, nothing but a simple and slightly exhausted reminder that his mother's Instagram page still existed. It is a strange kind of admission, one built not on new information but on the absence of it, on the fact that an entire viral theory could gather over 1 million likes while the simplest possible check, an actual look at Britney Spears' own account, sat there the whole time, unchecked, unclicked, and largely ignored. Jayden did not reveal a secret about his mother. He revealed something quieter and maybe more unsettling about the rest of us. That belief online increasingly needs an audience more than it needs a fact, and that the people closest to the person being rumored about are often the last ones anyone thinks to ask. A theory like this one does not really end when someone points out how absurd it is. It fades, slowly, replaced by the next caption engineered to make an ordinary life look impossible. But for a moment, at least, the loudest voice in the conversation belonged to someone who actually knew her, not a stranger analyzing a video frame by frame, but a son standing in front of his own camera, tired of watching his mother get erased by people who never bothered to check whether she was still there. That, in the end, is what Jayden James Federline finally admitted: not a mystery, not a confession, but quiet insistence that the truth was never hidden. It was simply less interesting than the rumor, and that, more than anything else, is the part of the story worth sitting with.